Hey, and welcome to this episode of Match Betting Uncovered, brought to you by ProfitDuel. So imagine you spend, hours setting up just this mathematically perfect sequence of bets, right?
Oh, yeah, I know exactly where this is going.
Right. You leverage a deposit match, you hedge the outcomes flawlessly across a few different platforms, and you lock in a guaranteed, let's say, $2,000 in profit.
Which is an amazing feeling.
Exactly. The games end exactly as you calculated. You hit withdraw, and then your account is frozen.
Ugh, the worst.
No email, no explanation, just a locked screen. And the absolute worst part, you have literally zero legal authority to appeal to. That money is just gone.
Yeah, and the crazy thing is, it happens every single day. I mean, we see bettors executing incredibly sophisticated strategies only to have their entire bankroll wiped out.
Just completely gone.
Right, because they didn't understand the invisible line dividing the sports betting world. They basically treated an unregulated platform like a legitimate financial institution.
And that invisible line is the main focus of today's deep dive. We are pulling from the core guides and technical breakdowns we've built right on the ProfitDuel platform, and our mission is to completely demystify this modern sports betting landscape.
Yeah, which is so crucial for anyone listening.
Right, so you know exactly where your money is safe. We really want to unpack the critical structural differences between regulated sportsbooks, the legal ones, and the unregulated offshore ones.
Because, I mean, understanding that divide isn't just about avoiding a frozen account, It's the absolute bedrock of turning gambling into a calculated, profitable strategy.
A reliable side hustle.
Exactly. If the platform itself isn't mathematically sound, no betting strategy in the world is going to save you.
So let's start with how this fractured landscape even came to exist, because I feel like a lot of bettors just assume sports betting was universally legalized a few years ago, and that's that.
Yeah, which is a massive oversimplification of what actually happened in 2018.
Right, when the Supreme Court overturned PXPA, the Professional and Amateur Sports Protection Act.
Exactly. The overturning of PSBA didn't just, wave a magic wand and make sports betting a nationwide standard.
Right.
Prior to 2018, the federal government essentially banned state-sponsored sports betting. Nevada was basically the only primary grandfathered exception.
So if you weren't in Vegas, you were kind of out of luck domestically.
Right. And because domestic companies couldn't operate legally, this massive multi-billion-dollar monopoly was just handed directly to offshore operators.
Companies located in jurisdictions completely beyond the reach of U.S. regulators.
Exactly. So for decades, bettors were forced into this single ecosystem. If you wanted to bet online from your couch in Ohio or New York, your literally only option was wiring money to an offshore platform.
It's kind of like prohibition, right? We were in this era of speakeasy offshore betting, and then 2018 hits, the federal ban is dismantled, and suddenly we have fully licensed establishments.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
It handed the authority back to the individual states and provinces to build their own legal frameworks. But the critical thing to understand is that it didn't kill the offshore market.
Oh, not at all.
Right, it just created a parallel one. We went from this monolithic, unregulated monopoly to a highly fragmented dual economy.
So today you have these fully licensed, heavily taxed operators functioning directly alongside the legacy offshore sites that, frankly, never closed their doors.
Exactly. And that explosion of choice actually created a really serious trap for the modern bettor.
Because they all look the same. When you search for odds today, you're hit with this barrage of platforms. They all have slick apps, they all offer live betting, massive sign-up bonuses.
Right, but under the hood, the structural integrity of these platforms couldn't be more different. And it really comes down to the mechanics of oversight.
Okay, let's break that down. What does that oversight actually look like?
So when a state legalizes sports betting, they don't just hand out permits and walk away. They establish a dedicated gaming commission. And these commissions, they don't just casually monitor things.
They're pretty strict, right?
Oh, incredibly strict. They audit every single line of code, every banking transaction, and most importantly for us, every single promotional offer before it ever goes live to the public.
I really want to focus on that promotional aspect because that is where the real value lies for match bettors.
Absolutely.
If a regulated sports book publishes a promo, let's say it's a bet $50, get 200 in bonus bets, offer what is the actual mechanical difference in how that offer is treated compared to an offshore site.
It comes down to legally binding terms and conditions. Before a regulated book can even advertise that offer, the State Gaming Commission reviews the specific language.
So they're checking the fine print.
Exactly. They ensure the rollover requirements are clearly stated and, mathematically speaking, actually possible. If you fulfill those conditions, the sportsbook is legally obligated to credit your account.
But what happens if they don't? Let's say there's software glitches or, I don't know, they flag my account as a sharp bettor and try to withhold the bonus. In the old offshore days, you'd just be arguing with a chatbot for hours until they finally closed your account.
Right. But in a regulated market, you bypass customer service entirely. You literally just go to the commission's website and file a formal dispute.
Wow.
Yeah, these regulatory bodies have direct access to the sportsbook's back-end audit logs. They can see the timestamp of your bet, the exact odds offered at that microsecond, everything.
So these gaming commissions are basically the Better Business Bureau, but with actual teeth.
Oh, far more teeth than the BBB. They have the authority to mandate immediate payouts. They can levy massive, like six-figure fines against the operator.
Or even suspend their license in extreme cases, right?
Exactly. And the sportsbooks know this. They know that trying to shortchange you out of a few $100s on some technicality just isn't worth jeopardizing a license that generates hundreds of millions in revenue.
Which fundamentally changes the psychology of placing a bet. I mean, knowing that safety net is there, you no longer have to factor in counterparty risk.
Right, you don't have to worry if the book is solvent.
Exactly. I don't have to wonder if they'll actually honor a massive payout. I only have to focus on the math of the bet itself.
And that psychological security is the absolute prerequisite for matched betting. I mean, you cannot extract value from a market if the rules of that market can be altered retroactively.
Okay, I want to push back on this a little bit, though, because I know there are bettors listening who will say, look, that all sounds great in theory, but I've been using my offshore account for like 15 years.
I hear that all the time.
Right. They say they've always paid me out. Sometimes they even offer better odds because they don't pay state taxes.
Yeah.
If they have a track record of treating people well, why shouldn't I use them?
Well, the thing is, relying on that track record is just deferred risk. It's what we call the goodwill trap.
The goodwill trap.
Yeah. I mean, yes, many offshore operators process standard withdrawals efficiently because it's good for business. They want you to trust them, so you keep depositing.
Right. It's a marketing expense for them, essentially.
Exactly. But the moment you become a liability to them, the moment you start consistently extracting thousands of dollars through promotional manipulation or arbitrage, that goodwill vanishes instantly.
So give me a concrete example of how that goodwill vanishes.
Yeah.
What does it actually look like when an offshore book decides they're done playing nice?
Well, it usually starts with something called a palpable error claim.
Okay, what's that?
Let's say you spot an incredible line discrepancy on a player prop. You hammer it, and the player hits the over in the first quarter. An unregulated sportsbook can simply point to a completely vague clause in their terms and conditions, claim the odds were posted due to a technical error,
Oh, wow.
and just void your winning bet after the game is already over. I mean, they'll refund your initial stake, sure, but the profit is totally erased.
And because there's no gaming commission, you have literally no one to appeal to. The sportsbook is acting as the player, the referee, and the governing body all at the same time.
Exactly. And if you complain too loudly, or if you ask for a large withdrawal after a dispute, they just implement these endless security reviews.
Oh, the delay tactics.
Yeah, they'll ask for notarized bank statements, copies of utility bills, photos of your ID, anything to frustrate you into giving up or just betting the balance away out of boredom.
Relying solely on goodwill is just an incredibly dangerous strategy when your hard-earned money is on the line. Which brings up a massive question about the legal mechanics here.
Sure.
If these offshore sites are operating outside the regulatory framework and they have this history of predatory behavior, how are Americans and Canadians even still using them? Why hasn't the government just shut off their access?
So that answer lies in a fascinating legal nuance. It comes down to the specific language of the Unlawful Internet Gambling Enforcement Act, the UIGA from back in 2006, combined with how most state laws are drafted. In the vast majority of jurisdictions, the legal code does not actually criminalize the individual bettor sitting on their couch placing a wager. The law doesn't target the placer of the bet.
Ah, right. The law targets the financial institutions and the companies accepting the bet.
Correct. The legislative focus is entirely on the operators.
Yeah.
But because these offshore companies are headquartered in places like, Costa Rica or the Isle of Man.
Local law enforcement has absolutely no jurisdiction to raid their servers.
Exactly. They can't arrest their executives. So the offshore operators exist in this massive jurisdictional blind spot. The bettor isn't technically breaking local laws by using them, and the operator is shielded by international borders.
It's a loophole that allows a fundamentally unsafe environment to just remain widely accessible.
Which is exactly why the responsibility falls entirely on the bettor to recognize the danger. And honestly, that realization dictates everything about the ProfitDuel philosophy.
Right, because relying on goodwill clashes completely with the mathematical certainty we need for consistent profit.
Exactly. We don't just prefer regulated markets, we demand them. We strictly isolate our strategies, our tools, and our members to fully licensed operators.
Let's transition into the mechanics of why that isolation is so crucial for the strategies we actually teach. I mean, we have over 500,000 trusted users across the USA and the UK generating consistent monthly earnings, often in the thousands.
And we aren't doing that by teaching people how to pick winners on a Sunday afternoon.
No, definitely not. We are teaching them how to exploit mathematical inefficiencies through matched betting, arbitrage, and expected value or EV betting.
And those mathematical techniques are entirely reliant on the structural integrity we were just talking about. If the platform is unstable, the math completely crumbles.
So let's break down those techniques so you, listening, understand the exact mechanisms at play here. Let's start with arbitrage. I always think the easiest way to conceptualize arbitrage betting is to just strip sports out of it entirely. Like, imagine you're at a garage sale and you spot a vintage comic book priced at $10. You pull out your phone, check an online marketplace, and see a collector actively offering to buy that exact same comic for $50.
Right. You don't need to know anything about the comic book storyline. You don't even care about comic books.
Exactly. You just buy it for 10 and instantly sell it for 50. You are capitalizing on a price discrepancy between two different markets.
And in sports betting, that comic book is basically a point spread or a money line. If regulated book A is offering the Knicks to win at plus 110 and regulated book B is offering the Celtics to win at plus 105.
We have a mathematical anomaly. Both sides of the same game are offering positive payouts.
Right. So if you size your wagers correctly across those two sports books, you guarantee a profit regardless of which team actually wins the game. The sport itself becomes completely irrelevant. You are simply trading the math.
But consider what happens to that arbitrage strategy if one of those books is an unregulated offshore site.
Oh, that's the nightmare scenario. Let's say you place $1,000 on the Knicks on the regulated book and $1,000 on the Celtics on the offshore book.
Okay.
The Celtics win. Your regulated bet loses, as expected. But when you go to collect your winnings from the offshore site, they hit you with that palpable error excuse we talked about and void the winning bet.
Oh, man. So your guaranteed profit instantly turns into a massive, unrecoverable $1,000 loss.
Exactly. The math was perfect, but the counterparty failed. This is why we absolutely cannot tolerate the goodwill trap when executing these strategies.
It's like you wouldn't use a highly sensitive scientific scale on a wobbly table.
That's a perfect way to put it.
Regulated sportsbooks provide the stable table we need for our calculators to work. And that reliance on flawless execution is even more critical when we talk about matched betting and the suite of tools we use at ProfitDuel.
Specifically the Dutch calculators.
Right. Let's walk through how a Dutch calculator actually functions because it's brilliant.
So a Dutch calculator handles the really complex balancing act of implied probability. Let's say you have a promotional free bet on one sports book and you want to hedge it on another to guarantee cash.
Right, but the odds are rarely perfectly symmetrical. You might be looking at like plus 150 on one side and minus 130 on the other.
Exactly. You can't just throw equal amounts of money on both sides and expect a clean profit. The payouts carry different weights.
So the calculator eliminates that guesswork entirely.
Right. It ingests the specific odds from both sports books and computes the exact fractional dollar amount you need to stake on each side. It ensures that the net return is mathematically identical down to the penny, regardless of the game's outcome.
It literally turns a volatile sports event into a fixed yield bond. But again, to go back to the analogy, the Dutch calculator is that precision instrument. If the offshore sportsbook decides to suddenly change the terms of the promo after you've locked in your hedge,
the scale tips and you take a loss. The environment dictates the efficacy of the tool.
absolutely.
And, the same principle applies to expected value, or EV betting. EV betting is really the most sophisticated form of value extraction, and it relies heavily on comparing lines across the entire market to find outliers.
Let's explain the mechanics of EV using a really simple coin flip.
Okay.
If someone offers you a wager on a perfectly fair coin, the true odds are 50-50. If they offer you an even money payout, You bet $10 to win $10. The expected value is exactly zero. Over 1,000 flips, you will just break even.
But what if a regulated sportsbook, maybe they're trying to attract action on a specific market, offers you plus 120 odds on that same fair coin flip?
Right, so you bet $10, but you win 12.
Exactly. You take that bet every single time. You might lose the first 3 flips, but the underlying math, the expected value, dictates that you have a massive quantifiable edge. Over a sufficient sample size, you'll print money.
And we use our software to scan thousands of lines across all regulated sportsbooks every second, comparing them against the sharpest odds in the world.
Right. And when a soft regulated book posts a line that deviates significantly from the true probability, our EV tools flag it. We tell our members exactly where the edge is and how much to stake based on their bankroll.
But, and this is the crucial part, the entire concept of expected value hinges on the absolute certainty of the payout. If you flip heads and the unregulated casino refuses to pay the $12, your expected value isn't positive.
No, it's a guaranteed negative return. A brilliant strategy executed in a lawless environment is just a sophisticated gamble.
Yeah.
By strictly avoiding the unregulated offshore operators, we prioritize not just your immediate security, but the maximization of your long-term earnings. We eliminate the what-ifs.
Taking the luck out of betting means controlling every variable you can, right down to the legal status of the platform you use. It's really a process of systematic elimination. You control the calculations with our Dutch and EV tools. You control the strategy by following the guides we provide.
And you control the legal security of your bankroll by operating exclusively within the jurisdiction of state gaming commissions.
You leave absolutely nothing to chance.
And that level of predictability is really the only way to treat sports betting as a legitimate, reliable side hustle rather than just a form of entertainment. It is the core philosophy of everything we build.
Now, as we move to wrap up this deep dive, there is a fundamental reality we always need to address. We spend all our time discussing algorithms, implied probabilities, regulatory frameworks. We treat these platforms like financial markets.
Right.
But the platforms themselves are inherently designed for gambling, and that brings a very specific set of psychological risks.
Yeah, that's a great point. Because the mechanics of our strategies strip the traditional financial risk out of the equation. But the interface of a sportsbook is still engineered to trigger dopamine.
Exactly. The flashing lights, the push notifications, the constant barrage of live odds it requires discipline to navigate.
Which is why responsible gaming resources are a non-negotiable part of our ecosystem. You have to protect your mindset just as rigorously as you protect your bankroll.
Absolutely. And we always want to highlight our partnership with Birch's Health. They provide specialized, completely free, and confidential problem gambling treatment.
Having those resources readily available alongside the national helpline at 1-800-GAMBLER is just critical.
Because true control means recognizing the psychological environment you're operating in. You need the self-awareness to step back if the strategy starts feeling like a gamble. Control the math, control the environment, and control your habits.
Well said.
Before we sign off today, I want to pose a final scenario for you to mull over, based on everything we've covered. We know the regulated market is expanding rapidly, and tools like ours are making it easier than ever for bettors to extract value systematically.
Right. The structural integrity of the regulated market is actively pushing the recreational bettor towards smarter strategies.
Exactly. So the question becomes, how does the unregulated offshore market respond to this existential threat? I mean, they are losing the arms race of trust, and they are losing market share every time a new state launches legal betting. What happens to the operators in the gray area when their legacy customer base starts migrating to safer options?
It is a highly concerning trajectory, honestly, because as the regulated sportsbooks tighten up their models and perfect their offerings, the offshore sites will likely become increasingly desperate.
Right.
We are already seeing the beginning of this. They can't compete on security, so they have to compete on spectacle.
You mean like offering massive, seemingly impossible promotions just to lure liquidity back onto their platforms?
Yes. We will likely see offshore books offering deposit matches that sound incredible, like a $5,000 bonus, but buried deep in the unregulated terms and conditions will be like a 50-time rollover requirement.
Making it mathematically impossible to ever actually withdraw the funds.
Exactly. They will weaponize their lack of oversight to trap whatever capital they can still attract.
Man, it's the equivalent of a speakeasy offering free drinks all night, but locking the doors when you try to leave with your wallet.
That's exactly what it is.
It's a fascinating dynamic to watch unfold, and it really reinforces exactly why we keep our strategies firmly planted in the light, relying exclusively on the math and the state commissions that protect it.
Because the offshore landscape will only get more volatile from here, but the mathematical certainty of a regulated market will remain constant.
That's it for this episode. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.